The moment we stepped into the house, I felt something was wrong. It wasn't the usual kind of fear. It was a heaviness, like the air itself was pressing down on my chest. I looked around and saw the old, cracked walls, a few fissures in the ceiling. But what made me uneasy wasn't the cracks. It was the silence, the eerie, unnatural stillness. I glanced at my mom, who was also scanning the room with a worried look on her face. She muttered something about not everyone being able to live in a house like this, but we had no other choice. When she said that, I felt like she sensed something that I couldn't quite grasp. On the first night in the house, I thought everything would be fine. But in the middle of the night, I heard footsteps, soft and faint, coming from the hallway. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but when I woke up and looked out of my room, I saw the door to my mom's room slightly open. My younger sister was standing nearby, staring blankly into the empty space. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't know how to respond. Those footsteps weren't from anyone in the house. This made me feel uneasy, and as I started noticing more signs, I began to suspect that this house was far from normal. In the following nights, the strange occurrences continued to escalate. One night, as I was sleeping, I suddenly heard whispers. They weren't clear words, but I could feel the anger in the voice. Every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I could feel someone standing right next to my bed, but when I opened my eyes, no one was there. One time I decided to get up and check. As I stepped out into the hallway, I saw a shadowy figure swiftly moving past the door. It wasn't any of us in the family. It was odd, almost like a ghost gliding past. No clear form, just a dark shape moving. I rushed back to my room, unable to sleep again. The coldness and fear felt like a weight pressing down on me. But what scared me the most were the whispers at night. 8. It wasn't just random words. Sometimes I could hear strange sounds. Footsteps, knocking on doors, noises like someone sitting in the living room, even though there was no one there. My mom started to become more agitated. She began hearing strange noises, objects moving around the house for no reason. But the worst part was when I realized that my little sister, she had changed. Every time I looked into her eyes, I felt something was off. Her eyes were hollow and full of darkness, like she wasn't the sister I knew anymore. One night, as I walked past her room, I saw her standing there, staring at the window, completely still. I called her name, but she didn't respond. Just stood there, her gaze unblinking. At that moment, I was truly terrified. We couldn't stay here any longer. But when my mom tried to find another place to live, she encountered things beyond belief. It seemed like the house didn't want us to leave. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, suddenly, the house became eerily cold. A strong gust of wind blew through, causing the light fixture to shake, and then it went out completely. Right after that, I heard a loud noise, like something heavy being thrown to the floor. Everyone went silent. No one dared to speak. I stood up and walked towards the front door, peering outside. The whole area around the house was quiet, not a single sound. I turned back, and at that moment, a dark figure swiftly passed by the window, making me jump in fear. I quickly called out for my mom, but she didn't respond. When I entered her room, she was sitting there, staring blankly at the wall, as if mesmerized. She didn't say a word. I looked at her, and I felt like I was looking at a completely different person. Everything in the house had become so terrifying that I couldn't bear it anymore. When we decided to leave the house, all I wanted was to live in a peaceful place. But as we were about to move out, I noticed something strange. The door wouldn't open, as if an invisible force was holding it shut. No matter how hard we tried, none of the doors would open. My mom tried to stay calm, but I could see panic creeping into her eyes. Finally, after much struggle, the front door opened. But we couldn't escape the feeling of dread that haunted us throughout the journey. Even when we moved to a new place, I couldn't shake the coldness and fear that gripped me whenever night fell. Just when we thought we had escaped the haunting, the strange occurrences continued to follow us. One dark night, as I woke up in the middle of the night, I once again heard footsteps. This time, they weren't the faint footsteps I had heard before. They were heavy, like someone was walking around the house. I immediately looked over at my mom, but she was sound asleep. I didn't dare make a sound, but I couldn't take my eyes off the door. The footsteps grew louder, closer. When I looked through the crack in the door, I saw a shadowy figure swiftly glide by. The next morning, my mom asked if I had felt anything strange during the night. I hesitated, not wanting to say anything, but eventually I told her. She fell silent for a moment before saying, "I heard the footsteps too." Things had escalated beyond the normal. This was no longer just a house, it was something that wanted to take us. We called in a spiritual expert, someone who was said to have the ability to communicate with spirits. The expert arrived and told us that the house was haunted by the souls of those who had died there. These spirits were unforgiving and didn't want us to leave. The expert performed an exorcism through the long night. However, after the ritual was finished, he told us that no matter how much we tried, we couldn't stay there any longer. The evil in this house is too strong and cannot be completely driven out. He warned us that we had to leave immediately. The next day we had no choice but to leave. But as we stepped out of the house, I felt like something was still holding me back. It was an unexplainable sense of dread. Even though we no longer lived there, that feeling still haunted me every night. The next day, as we started packing, I saw something strange in the kitchen. The cupboard door was wide open, and a broken dish lay on the floor. But what was even more unusual was how the pieces of the dish were arranged in a peculiar shape, almost like a warning sign. I didn't dare touch it, because I knew that everything in this house had a meaning. There was something very strange and ominous in the air. I felt like everything around me was alive, watching every move I made. My mom told me not to overthink it, but I could see in her eyes that she, too, couldn't shake off the fear she felt. We couldn't leave the house as peacefully as we had hoped. It felt like every step we took was being watched, as if the house didn't want us to leave. Just as we decided to leave the house, I felt like I had crossed an invisible barrier. But when we tried to drive away, the car wouldn't start. My mom tried restarting, but the car wouldn't respond. There was no reason for it, just an eerie silence. I looked out the window and saw the dark shadows still lingering around the house. It felt like some unseen force was holding us back. My mom sighed and began praying, and I followed suit. After a while, the car suddenly started. But as we drove away, I knew that the evil was still there, still following us, even though we had tried to escape. After we moved to a new house, everything seemed to be over. But on the late nights, I still heard the footsteps, the whispers, just like what had happened in the old house. Every time it happened, I couldn't sleep, my eyes wide open, staring into the darkness, feeling like something was staring back at me from within it. One night, I woke up and felt an icy chill. When I opened my eyes, I saw a shadow standing right next to my bed. This time, it wasn't anyone from the family. It was a shadowy figure, unclear, but very real. My heart raced, and I couldn't breathe. I tried to call out for my mom, but my voice seemed to be stuck, unable to make a sound. I looked around, and then the shadow began moving toward the door of the room. Just then, a loud noise came from the hallway, making me jump awake. At that moment, I couldn't be sure if I was fully awake or still in a nightmare. After the strange events continued to happen, my family decided we could no longer live in this fear. Although we had left the old house, the haunting still wouldn't let us go. My mom started seeking out spiritual experts, trying to find answers. One of the psychics she met said that the souls of those who had died unjustly in the old house couldn't move on, and they had followed us. Hearing this made me shudder. It only deepened the feeling that we hadn't escaped the past, no matter how hard we tried. We had no choice but to continue living in fear, hoping for some kind of relief, knowing deep down that it might never come. After moving into the new house, my mom and I started feeling the psychological toll. We couldn't sleep well, often waking up in the middle of the night with an eerie feeling, as if something was still present. Even though we had left the old house, the haunting still clung to us at every step. One evening, I decided to see a mental health specialist. The doctor advised me to take rest and distance myself from anything stressful. But, strangely, after each session, I felt like I was being pulled into an endless cycle with no escape. Anxiety began creeping in every time darkness fell. I couldn't imagine living in this fear forever. My mom began to show similar signs. She started muttering to herself, and she no longer talked as much as before. One morning, when I went into her room, I found her sitting silently, her eyes empty, staring into space as if she wasn't even there. I panicked and called her name, but she didn't respond. We decided to keep seeking help from spiritual experts. But nothing changed. The fear had become more than just a feeling. It had become a part of us. I couldn't forget the nights I saw the shadow pass by the window, or the footsteps that no one else heard but me. One day, I made the decision to visit the old house again. Even though I knew it could be a mistake, I felt like I needed to face this fear one last time. As I got closer to the house, the coldness enveloped me immediately. The air around that place seemed thick, suffocating, and unsettling. A week after we decided to return to the old house, I couldn't stop thinking about all the strange things that had happened. I couldn't erase the images of the shadowy figures and the footsteps from my mind. One evening, when I was home alone, I suddenly heard whispers from the darkness. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. But as I listened more closely, I realized that it was a voice I had never heard before. I stood up, trying to walk towards the sound, but as I got closer, all the lights in the house went out. Darkness enveloped me, and I felt like I was surrounded by an invisible presence. My heart raced. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor, unable to move. When I turned around, I saw a faint figure standing at the end of the hallway, its dark eyes staring directly at me. The feeling was terrifying, as if I was facing something that wasn't human. A cold sensation washed over me, making it impossible to move or speak. The fear grew stronger, so I decided to search for the truth about the house. My mom advised me against going back, but I felt like I couldn't live in this invisible fear any longer. I went to meet someone who had the ability to communicate with spirits. This person told me the story of the old house, that it was a place where many souls couldn't move on, and they couldn't leave us in peace. These spirits had followed us not only because of their unjust deaths, but also because of the pain and hatred they carried. They didn't want forgiveness. They only wanted our attention. From that moment, I understood that the house was not a place where we could live forever. Even though we had tried to run away, the evil was still chasing us. Even though we had left the old house, the ghosts in my memories couldn't be shaken off. The haunting wasn't just from invisible spirits, but also from the fear within me. Every step I take from now on, I'll always feel that the evil is still following me, no matter how far I run. Though life may be calmer now, I know the memories of the old house will forever haunt me, like a reminder of things that cannot be explained. I've learned that sometimes, forgiveness is not the most important thing. What matters is having the courage to face the fears within yourself, even if those fears will follow you for a lifetime.